Hey, thanks for joining us for this Idea Lab from Libraries for Digital Equity. Our Idea Labs are free monthly trainings. We start with a 10-minute micro training where we just get a little bit of information and background on the subject, and then we launch into a brainstorming session where we can get everybody involved, throw around some ideas. It's really a lab. We want to experiment. So let's go ahead and get started with our micro training today. So today we're talking about the impact of net neutrality on library services. I want to give a little bit of background, again, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So this is all happening because the FCC has recently reclassified broadband as a Title II service under the Communications Act. This had happened previously in 2015, but in 2017 it was struck down. So we're really celebrating that it's come back again. Now, since 2017, libraries have kind of, evolved in our services and in the things that we offer for getting folks connected to the internet. So you probably actually could list services that your library offers now that you didn't, 5 years ago. Let's talk about what a couple of those things might be. One of the trends that we're seeing is kiosks, bookmobile stops, remote access points. We're talking about somewhere that's not a library facility, but where people can come up and access the library's Wi-Fi network at any point. And so that might be a facility kind of like an Amazon pickup locker where you can go pick up your holds. It might be a kiosk like a tablet with an interface where you could, say, place a new hold, and you're also going to have Wi-Fi. Or it might be something like a pavilion in a parking lot where the bookmobile normally stops that now has Wi-Fi 24/7. So those are our remote access points. There's also some libraries trying interesting things with providing home internet. And so often that's in affordable housing or other high density housing, like for instance, an apartment building where there's a lot of students who are unlikely to have internet at home. And so a library or a school might say, you know what, we're going to offer internet to that whole building. We're just going to provide it. That's a really cool project, and it's kind of new, but it could have some impacts on whether that library whether that library needs to change how they're offering their services because of the new, ruling on net neutrality. So another category here is EBS or CBRS networks. So what that means is there's EBS and CBRS are the small piece of spectrum, wireless spectrum, which is how we offer mobile services on one side, Wi-Fi on the other side. EBS and CBRS are right in the middle. And so that means the library essentially puts an antenna on its building and it can push out a network much, much further beyond, what the Wi-Fi could do in the parking lot and across a whole city or, across a large area. Now, because it's in this specific spectrum, EBS or CBRS, a regular cell phone or a regular laptop can't access that network. It's not going to appear like a regular Wi-Fi network. You're going to need a specific device. So that could be a SIM card that the library checks out that you can just put into your device. It could also be the device itself, like a laptop, or it could be a modem, a router that you could take to your home, plug in, and bam, you have home internet. Or it can be a hotspot that just connects to this network. So this is an interesting way for the library to expand their network, but still to have some control over who can access it, how their patrons are using it. And then finally, municipal broadband service. So this means the municipality is often building and owning and managing a broadband network. That means the infrastructure itself, as well as the process of getting it out to homes, getting it to patrons, running it, connecting it, billing it. And they probably will contract out, in most cases, municipalities contract out for some portion of this. Maybe it's the management of the infrastructure itself. Maybe it's the billing cycle. They'll probably contract out for portions of it. But the library's role in that is really flexible. I mean, it's kind of up to the library and the municipality what that looks like. And there are a couple of real trailblazers where libraries are taking the lead on these municipal networks. So that's exciting. That's interesting. Okay, so there are some opportunities and some concerns with these changes to broadband services. So first off, the US code says that a telephone provider, a telecommunications provider, has to protect the privacy of their consumers' information. That has previously applied to, telephone and other telecommunication services. Now that broadband is classified as one of those services, that means our internet service providers are subject to those same privacy regulations for the first time. This is interesting. This is really exciting. We're going to see what that looks like, what those changes look like, because right now, I mean, they haven't been subject to any of those restrictions before, and so we could see a real change in the privacy landscape across the US, especially because we really lack federal legislation at this point that protects consumer privacy and people's digital footprint. It also prohibits contracts and agreements which have previously been very common for an apartment building owner or a complex, manager to have an agreement with an internet service provider where they say, okay, you wire the building, you provide internet to each of these apartments, you charge them $150, and I get $30 out of every subscription, every apartment that subscribes to your internet, which is the only choice they have. That's not allowed anymore. That's exciting. First, because if the library or another entity wants to get involved and offer some program to, especially to low-income families, this could be a great tool to be able to get in there. But second, it's also a good tool, another opportunity for education and for libraries to help their patrons be empowered in the marketplace, because our patrons are going to have a lot more options, a lot more freedom of what they're doing, how they're choosing to connect. So that's exciting. Okay, this also establishes this rule from the FCC, this order from the FCC also establishes a bright line rule which says that there can be no blocking of lawful content. No blocking of lawful content. That is obviously in conflict with a library's responsibility, if they want to get E-rate funding, to do SIPA compliant blocking. That's blocking for the Children's Internet Protection Act. That's interesting. I don't know what that conflict is going to look like, but I think we're going to see some evolving either legislation or rulemaking from the FCC on exactly what that means. So I think the big question on the impact here is the library an internet service provider? That is going to make the big difference. And one thing that this order does clarify is that an organization that purchases broadband services in order to offer them to their patrons as just part of their model, part of their business model, is not a broadband service provider. So that means if we're just offering, Wi-Fi internet in our building, we're connecting, computers in our building as we have been doing, we're still not a broadband service provider. That's good. I mean, that would be kind of absurd if that were considered a provider. But these other things, these more out there ideas that we're trying, that's questionable. We don't know, and so I think this is going to be an interesting evolution. So I want to share a couple of actionable ideas, but I'm hoping that more ideas come from our discussion, which is coming up next in just a minute. First off, I want to say, if your internet access policy or online access and acceptable use policy, there's a million things it could be called. If that policy hasn't been updated recently and the services that you're offering for getting on the internet have been updated, you need to take another look at it. That policy should be at least as young as your youngest internet service. This one is here with a question mark because I do think it's an item for discussion. And that's the idea that we need to clarify who our service populations are, especially when we're trying these ideas that are kind of cutting edge, because the more we're offering these services, the more we're expanding who we describe as our responsibility to serve. And that means we're also expanding who it's our liability for not serving appropriately. And so I do think there's some value in saying, this is our service population, this is who we are trying to reach with this particular program or this particular service. And I think that's something that we're going to need to see done more proactively and from the get-go when we're designing these programs. The last point here is to work collaboratively with your internet service providers, because the more we get into the business of offering, internet services, the more we're going to come into conflict with those actual businesses that need to make money from offering internet services. And so if you can build a positive relationship now, that's going to put you in a much better position, because I would hate to see libraries in that position of coming up against, having to go to City Hall and coming up against the local internet service provider, or having to go to the state representative whose campaign was funded by your internet service provider and go to them as your little public library and say, oh wait, but please don't do this. So build those relationships now while they can be positive so that you can work together, join resources and make sure we're working towards the same goal. The point is really just be proactive. I do think it's worth putting in the thought now, putting in the effort now so that we're ready for whatever these changes might do to our services. Okay, so that's what I have for our micro training today. Let's go ahead